Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. All right, great. So we're excited to have you in today's session, right? And I would like to get to know a little bit more about you. So please, before we get started, I would like to break the ice here, and I would like to just help us establish a few housewarming rules that will help us ensure that this session remains very interactive. All right. So as we proceed with the session, please, I would very much love to get responses from everyone on the call. Right. So please, when I'm asking for thumbs ups, when I'm asking for responses in the chat, it's very important that you are interactive. All right. That helps me know that you're actually following with the session. All right. This is a virtual session, so I can't exactly see you, right, and pick up on physical cues like you nodding your head or looking at me, so I know that you're paying attention. Right. So at intervals, I'll be asking for thumbs ups. I'll be asking for responses in the chat. That helps me know that you are actually in the session and that you're actually following through. All right. Let's test run that. So if you are excited to get started with today's session, just throw in your favorite emoji in the chat. I can already see a couple of them coming in. So let's keep them coming in. If you're excited to get started, just throw in your favorite emoji in the chat. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Maimuna. Thank you, Tega. Thank you, Babatunde. Thank you, Fred. Fred seems excited. I can see the laughing emoji. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Oluwafumike. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Mary Tello. Thank you so much, everyone. That's fantastic. Fantastic, fantastic. All right, very quickly, let's dive into the conversation for today. But before we do, I would like to get to know us a little better. I'm very much aware that some of us are joining a Analytics Masterclass for the very first time. Right. So if this is your very first time of joining a Analytics Masterclass overall, you can just type in a one in the chat. All right, just type in a one in the chat. And if you're not a newcomer, I mean, you've joined some of our sessions, maybe even a clarity session, you can type in a zero in the chat box. All right, so I can see Meritello. Meritello, it's great to have you. Lucky, it's great to have you. It's going to be an exciting session. So Fred is giving me a zero. It means Fred is not a newcomer. All right, fantastic. Thank you, Queen. All right, let's keep the responses coming. Remember, that's the way we keep the session interactive. Thank you, Kendi, Oluwafumike, Esther, Babatunde. That's fantastic. Fantastic. So it's great to have us all in tonight's session. Let me quickly share my screen and then we can dive into the conversation for today. All right. I believe everyone can see my screen at this point. Yeah. Please confirm that with a thumbs up. All right, great, great. So it's great to have each and every one of us on the call. Some of us who are just joining for the very first time, and some of us who have joined previous sessions as well. All right, in today's session, we'll be looking at how you would be able to write your very first lines of code in Python as a complete beginner. All right, so don't worry whether you have any experience working with Python, even if you've never heard about Python before. All right, just be relaxed and don't worry. I'm here for you. I'm going to be taking you through this session in as much detail as possible. All right, so we are excited to have you in the session. Before we even proceed any further, I would like to also get to know us. So for some of us, we are just joining this session for the very first time. So I would also like to know where you are currently joining the session from. Right, so you can just type in the chat, oh, I am Jedediah and I'm currently joining the session from Dada Dash. All right. So I'm Jedediah. I'm currently joining the session from Kaduna State, Nigeria. All right. So I would also like each and every one of us to type in the chat where we are currently joining the session from. All right. And also what we are looking forward to learn in today's session. What you're looking forward to in today's session. What are your expectations for the session? Just type that in the chat. I would very much like to meet everyone. Okay. We have Maimuna from Tanzania. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay, we have Williams joining from Delta State. We have Kendi, who is currently joining from Lagos. We have Esther joining from Plateau State. That's interesting. We have Babatunde from Scotland. Interesting. Queen from Zambia. All right, Steve from Abuja. That's fantastic. So as we can see, you can already tell that we have a very diverse audience. You can already tell that we have people joining in from different parts of the world coming in to ensure that they are able to learn these tech skills and break into the field of tech. We are excited to have you all, right? And would ensure that we hold your hands through the entirety of the program, right? Through the entirety of this session to help you understand how you can navigate Python and as well as get into the field of data science, right? So I'm excited to have each and every one of us. And very quickly, we are going to dive into the discussion for today. All right. Like I mentioned, in today's session, we'll be looking into writing our very first lines of Python code. All right. But who are we? Who are we at Analytics? Who are we at Analytics? Now, Analytics is a leading ed tech brand which focuses on educating people of the Black community and Africans as well, helping them break into the field of tech. Right? We have different programs that cut across data analytics, business analysis, data engineering, all the way to data science, Scrum, APM, right? HR analytics, and even cyber security. So we are here to ensure that we help people, especially Africans and people of the Black community, transition into tech seamlessly, right? And we have a wealth of experience doing this. I mean, we've been doing this for over 4 years now, and we've trained thousands of participants, helping them break into the field of tech. So I can confidently tell you, right, that we have that level of expertise, and we are here to ensure that your transition into tech becomes seamless, right? And now I'll be introducing myself, the person standing in front of you. My name is Jedidiah Osara, right? And I'm a seasoned professional in the field of data science and machine learning, right? So my experience spans across working in industries like marketing, finance, education, aviation, healthcare, and so on, right? And my skills span across using tools like Microsoft Excel, Tableau, SQL, and Python as well, right? Working on machine learning models from computer vision to natural language processing. I've worked on projects across different industries with organizations across different countries in about 3 continents now, right? Working with organizations across the US, UK, Canada, and of course, Nigeria, right? I've personally trained over 2,000 participants, helping them to transition seamlessly into the field of data science. So you can be confident that the person standing in front of you actually knows his onions and can actually deliver on the promise. All right. So this is who I am, and I'm excited for tonight's session. I'm sure you are as well. All right. And we are going to be having an incredible conversation today. We're going to be learning a lot. We're going to be learning a lot. All right, this is going to be a breakdown of what we will be covering in tonight's session. First off, we'll be writing some code in Python, right? We'll be looking into what Python is all about, and we'll be writing some interesting code in Python. We'll also be exploring the pathway to becoming a data scientist and how you can actually secure a job working in data science. All right. We'll also get to introduce you to our extensive internship program, which is something very interesting. All right. And it's something very vital, especially for you who is trying to break into data science. So be rest assured that we are fully ready to address all of your needs. All right. And I'm going to be discussing each and every one of these items as we proceed in the session. And then at the end of the session, I have some special package for you. All right. I have some very special package for you. So in order for you to benefit from that special package, I want you to stay till the end of the session so you can actually have that special package and actually enjoy it. All right, so please ensure that you stick to the end so you can actually benefit from that special package. So if you're ready for us to get started, can you just type in good to go in the chat? If you're ready to get into the conversation, just type in good to go. Thank you, Fred. Fred is keeping it short. GTG. That's fantastic. Thank you, Oluwasheu. Thank you, Lucky. Good to go. 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 That's fantastic. Fantastic. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. All right, let's get started. So first off, I would be introducing us to something called Google Colab and as well as Python. Right, some of us might have heard of Python before. Some of us might just be hearing about Python for the very first time. And some of us heard about Python after learning that it's a programming language and you have to write code some of us got afraid. Maybe the name sounds scary, right? If Python sounds scary to you, I want you to just relax. All right, do like this. Do like this. Relax and be rest assured that Python is no big deal, right? Python is a very interesting programming language to learn. One of the easiest to learn, in my opinion, right? Python is arguably one of the most easy programming languages to learn. Now, Python is a very powerful tool. All right, it's a high-level programming language, and what that simply means that is that Python's syntax is quite close to human language, so it's very easy for you to understand what the code looks like, understand what the code is about. Right, so Python is very easy to learn. So don't get scared when you hear Python. It's not the snake, right? I know the snake is scary, but yeah, Python is very easy to learn, and I'm going to be doing the very best I can to ensure that I break down some of the concepts we're going to be looking at, and we can see the potential that lies ahead if we can be able to hone our skills and break into the field of tech using Python. All right. Another interesting thing I would be taking us through would be Google Colab. Google Colab. Now, Google Colab is a work environment. All right. It's basically a work environment where we can actually run Python codes and run them in a specific format called notebooks. All right. We are going to be working on them in a specific format called notebooks. Now, just like some of us, almost everyone here, I believe everyone eats, but I'm not sure if everyone cooks. I'm pretty sure some of us don't cook. If you cook, just type a one in the chat. If you don't, you can type in a zero. Right? If you cook, you make homemade meals. You cook yourself for yourself. Just type in a one in the chat. All right, I can see Lucky. That's interesting. So Lucky the chef. All right. Everyone cooks. I'm looking out for people like me that don't know how to cook, please. I'm getting just one. So it seems like everyone on the call is a cook, unlike people like myself, right? That don't know how to cook. The best we can do is probably order out or or eat snacks. But yeah, interesting. All right. So each and every one of us have testified that we know how to cook. Right. So most of us know how to cook. Okay, I can see Juan who said he does not know how to cook. All right. So for anyone that has been in a kitchen before, you would agree with me that there are different tools and utensils in a kitchen, right? And each one has its specific function. All right. If I wanted to heat up water to take a shower, I want to be putting that in a frying pan, would I? Of course not. If I wanted to heat up water to take a shower, I wouldn't be putting that in a frying pan, right? If I wanted to bake cake, I wouldn't be putting that in a pot. Of course, I would need an oven to do that, right? And I will need pans that will go into the oven and not a pot. All right. So all every single tool in the kitchen has its specific function. All right. We know the pot is used for cooking and then the pans are used for frying, right? And many different purposes as well. All right. So the same happens here, right? Even in our professional lines of work, if I wanted to build a slide deck for a presentation I was doing to stakeholders within my organization, I'll be using a tool like Microsoft PowerPoint and not Microsoft Excel. Right. If I was working on data on a spreadsheet, I'll be using Excel and not Microsoft Word. And if I was just typing in documents, right, maybe a documentation about, or I was writing about a research and documenting the entire process I went through. I could do that on a Microsoft Word file instead of on a spreadsheet or using PowerPoint. All right. So each one of these tools we can testify has their individual unique functions or the purpose for which they were invented or created. Right. The same happens for Google Colab. Google Colab is a special working environment that allows us to run Python codes in formats called notebooks. We're going to be looking at Google Colab eventually. I just want to introduce us to the idea of this working environment. Please, if everything I'm saying is making sense, just give me a thumbs up so I know you're actually on track and you're following. All right. We are exercising some of those housewarming rules we discussed earlier. Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for your responses. That's amazing. That's amazing. All right, great. So let's move on. right? We'll be looking at Google Colab and we'll be conducting some level of work within Google Colab. All right. At the end of the session, you would have access to these slides as well as everything we've worked on in this session. All right. Some of the contents we are going to be looking at in Google Colab would first off look into Google Colab, get to understand what the interface looks like and how it operates. We'd also have a brief introduction into the Python programming language. We'll also look at concepts like comments and markdowns and differentiate between these two. All right. We'll also be looking at data types, right, and the different data types that exist in Python. Right. We might not have enough time to go over all of them. However, we'll focus on just the data types that we are going to be looking at in today's session. All right, we'll look at variable assignment, right? Something some of us are familiar with, right? Some of the mathematicians that might be on the call, and probably we could reminisce on this, looking back at school days, right? And then we'll look at conditional statements, and we'll see how we can apply all of the concepts we've learned into a real world scenario. We'll see how we can combine all of this into a real world scenario. All right, so very quickly, I'm going to be moving us to the Jupyter Notebook environment. And from there, we'll be proceeding further into the discussion for today's session. Okay, so if you want to, I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat, and I'm just going to quickly respond to those as we proceed into the actual work for today. So first off, to Prince, to save us some time, right? What you need to do, what I will encourage you to do, is just pay attention to the session. Try to follow along. Try to understand what is actually going on, right? So don't worry, a recording will be provided to you along with the slides that were used in the session, so you can have that to revise this session, all right, and solidify some of the knowledge and concepts that you have learned in the session, all right. And then to Fred, in order for you to have access to the recording and the materials for the session, please make sure that you fill out the attendance form, right? It's very important that you fill out the attendance form in order for you to have access to these materials. All right, thank you so much, guys, and going to quickly stop sharing this screen, and then we can move into Google Colab and proceed to the rest of the session. All right, so I'm coming over to my browser, um, Google Colab. All right, so to have access to Google Colab, you can just open your browser, most preferably Google Chrome's browser, and just go to the search bar and search for Colab. Right, you could search Google Colab. Google Colab. You can search for Google Colab and you can find it at the top. I think it should be one of the first options you have access to. That's Google Colab. You can click on it and it will take you to the dedicated Colab environment that you can use for your Python codes and for your analysis in data science. All right. Now, once you get to this site, like I said, type in Google Colab. It will give you lots of options. Just click on the first one you see. It brings you to this environment, and all you have to do is click on New Notebook. Click on New Notebook. This will bring us to an environment that allows us to actually start running all of our code. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Google Colab is an interface, is a work environment that allows us to run Python code, and at the same time, it saves this Python code in a format called notebooks. It saves your Python code in a format called notebooks. All right, so we have our very first notebook, and we are going to be getting started with the programming. All right, so once again, I want to specially welcome us all as we dive into Python. I want to welcome us all as we dive into Python. The very first thing I'll be introducing us to is the Google Colab environment. The Google Colab environment. First of all, I want to ask. I hope the dark theme is not an issue. If you can see clearly and it's all fine, please give me a thumbs up. I personally prefer the dark theme. I hope it's not a problem for anyone at all. All right, awesome, awesome then. Awesome there. All right, so the Google Colab environment. First off, we are able to see that there is a cell in here. We can see this and this single box that allows us to type in code in it. Right, these are called cells in Google Colab. Right, these individual boxes that you can type in your code in, it's called a cell. And in Google Colab, we have two types of boxes like this for typing, right? I'm trying to use much more simpler words, right? So we have this box called a cell for you to type in code, right? And there's a slightly different version of the same box, which is called a markdown box. Now, the difference between the cell and the markdown is that the cell boxes, you can basically type in your code that Python runs and interprets as an actual code, right? So it interprets it as an instruction that you're giving to Python. It runs it and gives you an outcome. All right, so the cells are used for typing in your code. On the other hand, we have markdowns, and markdowns are used for documentation, specifically for documentations. Right? Basically, what markdowns allow you to do is to add a little more text that give more context to what your code is about. You can also add text that give explanations, that gives documentation about the processes that you're going through in your analysis. And that's one interesting thing about working in notebook files. All right, that's one of the flexibilities you get to have, especially as a data scientist working in notebook environments like Google Colab. All right, so the major difference between a cell and a markdown is that a cell runs code and a markdown runs text files for documenting your processes. All right, please give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. Just give me a quick thumbs up if that makes sense and you're on track. All right, fantastic. That's great. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Memuna. All right, moving on. I mentioned that we have cells for code and then we have markdowns for comments. All right. In Google Colab, you can see once I hover over this cell, just below it, you can see it says code here and it says text here. If I click on the plus for a code, it adds a new cell for me to run actual code in. And when I select the one for text, it adds a cell for me to run markdowns. It adds a cell for me to run markdown. So I'm going to click on the text so we can see what a markdown looks like. I can type in welcome to Python. Welcome to Python. And if I run this cell, you'll see what that looks like. Welcome to Python. You see what that looks like. Welcome to Python. Meanwhile, if I come over to an actual cell for code and I type in welcome, I could type in practically the exact same thing. Welcome to Python. And I run this, Python is going to give me an error. Right? Python is going to bring up an error. Right? Just a moment for Google Colab to give a response. All right, so we can see an error here. Welcome to Python, and it says invalid syntax. It says invalid syntax. That's because I'm trying to run actual text in a cell that's meant for code. I'm trying to run actual text in a cell that's meant for code. So we can see the difference between a markdown and a cell. A cell is used to run codes and a markdown is used to run text. All right, fantastic. Now, meanwhile, even though you can't run actual text like this um, in a cell, right, there are other ways that allow you to run actual text in Python in your cells. All right, and we're going to be looking at each and every one of these as we proceed. All right, so now that we have an understanding of this, we'll also be looking at an interesting concept called comments. All right, comments. Now, comments are basically single lines of text that you can actually run in your cell, right? However, Python does not interpret them as code. All right, comments are basically lines of text you can have in your cells, right? Remember, the cell is the box where you can run code, right? So comments are lines of text that you can add in your cells that Python runs without throwing an error, right? Python interprets them as lines of text. Python understands them as comments. Now, the purpose of comments is for explaining your code, to give context to your code. I mentioned earlier that markdowns are used for documenting your process. Comments help you with explaining what your code is about, right? I can write a lot of lines of code, right? And this code is most likely going to be shared with some other data scientist, right? And at some point, I might leave the organization and a new data scientist might pick up the project from where I left off, right? For them to understand what I have worked on and for them to get better context on what I have done, right? The markdowns and comments help them to have a proper understanding of what I have within my code, right? So if I copy this same text we just ran a moment ago, I copy the same text we ran a moment ago, I add a new cell and I paste it in here, all right? To convert this into a comment, all I have to do is add a hashtag, all right? All I have to do is add a hashtag in front of it. And you can see now once I run this cell, it does not give me any output and it also does not throw in an error, right? It does not give me an output and it also does not throw in an error. That's because Python recognizes this as a comment. By adding this hashtag in front of it, Python understands that, oh, what Jedediah has typed in is an actual comment and he does not expect me to process it as a code or as an instruction on something I'm meant to do. All right. So that is the major difference between the actual code and comment. As soon as you add a hashtag in front of a line of code, it becomes a comment. And comments help us to give context to what our code is about. Now that we have our comments, we have an understanding of what the environment looks like and the different features that exist in this environment. We are going to be moving forward to discuss something called data types. We're going to be moving forward to discuss something called data types, all right? And I'm going to focus on the major data types that we'll be looking at in today's session, all right? I'm going to add a new cell under this for code. Sorry, I'm going to add a markdown, right? And then just type in data types, right? So that by the time you get this, you'll know that from this point on, we started discussing data types, right? So this helps us to document the entire process we are going through in tonight's session. All right, so data types, data types. If you've heard that concept before, data types, right? If you've heard the concept before data types, just give me a thumbs up. If you've heard about data types, maybe you've come across data types before, maybe you've worked on some programming somewhere else. You've heard about data types. Okay, interesting. So we have Memuna, we have Dio. That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, some of us say we've heard of but not worked on data types. We've heard of data types, but we've not worked on data types. Interesting, interesting. So data types are basically forms and formats that our data exists in, right? They are basically forms and formats that our data exists in. Now, I believe each one of us has been to a market at some point, right? And you've had to buy certain equipment, and there have been different modes of payment depending on the item you are actually buying, right? At some point, you've probably gone into the market to buy something really expensive that you could not take the cash for that particular product with you. All right. Take for example, buying a new car, right? It won't be very ideal for you to take the entire cash, right? Most of us would deem it fit or deem it safer to maybe try a wire transaction or pay using a check. All right. So there are different modes of payments depending on whatever it is that you're buying. You might have gone into a store and after purchasing everything that you needed, what you used was your card to make payment for the items that you bought. All right. And you might have gone into a store, got a couple of things, and you used actual cash to make payments for the items that you bought. Now, in that marketplace, we've been able to understand that there are different payment methods, right? And different tools or denominations or forms in which you can make payments for the items that you are buying, right? You might be using bills or coins. Some countries, right? For some of us in the UK, I believe in the US as well, we also use coins as a legal tender for making payments for certain goods. All right. So you can't imagine going to the market trying to get a piece of sweet, just a single piece of sweet, and then you are writing a check to the store owner. How do you think that person is going to look at you? Or just imagine you are a store owner, someone walks in and they want to buy a piece of sweet and then they are writing you a check. How would you look at that person? How would you look at that person? Just type in the chat. What would be your reaction to such a purchase? I walk into your store, I want to purchase a pack of sweets, and then I'm writing a check for the pack of sweets. Probably the pack of sweets cost like friends say now so that you do for here. All right, interesting. That's really outrageous. Yeah, interesting. So you'd see it as an absurd situation. Why would you be using a check to pay for a pack of sweets that probably costs maybe $10 or so, right? So it's very important that you understand the appropriate legal tender to use in different environments. All right, there are vending machines that do not accept cash. For you to have access or for you to gain to buy any goods from that vending machine, you need to have coins. All right, you use your coins to be able to pay for those goods you want to purchase. Right, you want to get a drink from a vending machine, you need to change your fiat currency, that's your cash or your actual paper currency, into coins so you can actually pay for the goods. All right, the same happens here. um, Data types are quite similar to the different legal tenders that we make use of. All right. For Python to be able to understand what you're doing, all right, for Python to be able to understand the kind of transaction you want to conduct, you have to ensure that you are using the right mode of payment. All right. In this case, that's your data type. All right. If you want Python to perform a specific kind of operation for you, you have to make sure that you are passing in the right kind of data for it to perform those specific operations on. All right. I'm going to come back to our Jupyter notebook and run us through the first three, or the simplest basic three data types that we are actually going to be exploring today and how they actually work in Python. The very first is an integer. All right. The very first is an integer. All right. Integers are basically whole numbers that Python actually can perform analysis on. Now, earlier I typed in welcome to Python. Right? I typed in welcome to Python as actual text. Welcome to Python. I typed in welcome to Python as plain text, and you can see that Python threw in an error. That's because Python does not accept this currency. Right? Python does not understand what kind of data this is. Python does not understand what kind of data this is. So in order for you to interact with Python properly, you need to be able to pass in the kind of data in the format that Python actually understands. Now, for you to pass in this kind of text to Python, you need to pass it in as a string, because that's the format of text that Python actually understands. Right. So for me to give this to Python, for Python to understand this and actually process it, I need to pass it in as a string. Right. The same goes for numbers. If I need Python to interact with certain numbers, I need to pass them in the format that they actually exist in, that Python understands. Now, one of the formats we'll be looking at are integers. Integers are basically whole numbers that do not have any fractional points. Right. Any kind of number that does not have decimal points is an integer, and Python recognizes them as integers. Now, with integers, Python is able to process them, perform mathematical operations, because these are actual numbers, without passing through, without getting any error. For example, if I type in 10 and I run this cell, you'll see that Python runs it successfully without having any errors. This is a typical example of an integer. You can see the number 10. Let me add in a comment here. Let's begin to practice some of the things we've learned. All right, so we can see the value we have here. These are integer. So we run this cell 10, and Python completely understands this particular value. It's able to interpret this as an actual number. All right. If we type in 1 million and run the same cell, Python is able to interpret that value as as an integer. All right. And it's able to print it out. It's able to give us an output because it understands this data type. All right. The second data type we are looking at would be floats. And now, okay, the write-up is not clear. Let me try to zoom in. Right, so I know a couple of questions came in through the chat. I'm going to be addressing every single question, right? So please just be patient and I'll be looking into every question that we have and providing answers to them. Right, so please confirm that my text is clear now, is visible. Please confirm. All right, thank you. All right, so we have a million over here and Python is able to understand what a million is. All right, what if we have decimal numbers? If we have decimal numbers, for example, the value of pi, right? The value of pi, that's 3.142. Yeah, 3.142. And if we run this cell, you can see that Python is able to return an output to us. That's because Python actually understands this particular data type. This particular data type is called float in Python. This particular data type is called float. All right, so let me add a comment and add that in. Float. Python understands this data type and is able to interpret it and actually give us an output. Now, Python recognizes these different data types and can actually perform operations on them. All right, we've seen 10 over here. We can perform operations like addition. If we say 10 plus 10 and we run this, Python understands that 10 is a number and the second 10 is also another number, which are integers, and I can actually perform mathematical operations on these values and give you an output. All right, so we can see 10 plus 10 and Python is giving us the right answer, which is 20, because it recognizes it as an integer data type and can process it. The same goes for float 3.142. Python is able to run that. If we run another float number, let's say 9.99999, and we run this, Python also recognizes this and is able to give us an output. All right, so different data types Python recognizes and Python understands and is able to interpret. All right, and like I mentioned, it's able to interpret this so that it can perform specific functions on them. All right, the next data type we'll be looking at is called string. And I already rightly introduced us to the concept of strings earlier, right? Briefly, even though we have not looked at them, right? So we are going to look at what a string is. Now, a string is basically a collection of characters, right? A string is basically a collection of characters that are enclosed in quotation marks, right? A collection of characters that are enclosed in quotation marks. Now, whatever you put in quotation mark, Python interprets as a string, regardless of whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, as long as it's placed in quotation marks, Python interprets them as strings of text. And the reason for that is simple. So it can be able to differentiate between when you are typing in text, for example, sentences like my name or like welcome to Python that we typed in earlier, right? So I can type that again, welcome to Python, all right? Welcome to Python with an exclamation mark. As soon as I enclose this text, as soon as I enclose this in quotation marks and I run it, you'll see that Python now understands what I actually passed in. Right? As soon as I enclose it in quotation marks and I run it, it becomes sensible. It now makes sense to Python and it's able to run it. It's the same text, just a slight difference of ensuring that this text is actually enclosed in quotation mark. Right? Welcome to Python. And now Python actually recognizes what I'm typing in. Right? Same goes for my name. If I type in Jedediah, for example, I would need to enclose that in quotation marks. Now I have my quotation marks and I can type in Jedediah in between. Okay, so Jedediah, and I run this cell. Python understands what I'm actually typing. It understands that this is a collection of text that it can actually run, right? And there are specific operations that can be performed on text data, on strings, data types that cannot be done on integers or floats. All right, I hope this is all making sense. All right, and like I mentioned earlier, strings can collect any collection of characters. Basically, you can have numbers, you can have text, whatever it is. as long as it's a collection of characters and is enclosed in quotation marks. It starts with an opening quotation marks and ends with a closing quotation mark. Python recognizes it as a string and runs it that way. Right? So I can have something like password 123. And if I run this, Python recognizes this and is able to run it seamlessly for me. So far, we've looked at three data types, right? Integers, floats, and strings, right? These are the foundational things we are going to be looking at, especially as we proceed in today's session. We're going to be seeing how we'll be interacting with integers, floats, and even strings in the conversation that we're going to be having today. Now, while we've seen these different data types, there's an inbuilt function, right? There's an inbuilt function within Excel, within Python that helps us to be able to identify the specific data type of whatever value we are working with. Now, we've been able to learn the characteristics of these different values. We know that whole numbers are integers, numbers with a decimal point are float numbers, right? And numbers that do not have, numbers without decimal points are integers, numbers with decimal points are float numbers. And then whatever set of characters you have enclosed in quotation marks, they are interpreted as string. Regardless of that foundational knowledge, Python has an inbuilt function called the type function that helps us to identify the different data types of whatever value we are working on. All right. So if I run type, open my bracket and close it, and I pass in whatever value, Python is able to tell me what data type that particular value exists as. So for example, I typed in type, and if I type in 40.9, all right, and I run this cell, Python returns float, right? It's able to understand that this is a float value and not an integer. If I type in the same thing, the type function, and then I pass in a value like 10, and I run this, Python is able to interpret this and understand that this is an actual integer. It recognizes the data type and is able to tell me, oh, this is an integer. What if I pass in type, and then I pass in 100.0? What do you think the data type for this is going to be? Please type in the chat. What do you think the data type for this is going to be? Looking at this, what will the data type be? Interesting. I'm really glad that we're actually following. This was kind of a trick question. I was thinking some of us might fall into the trap, but I'm glad that we're actually understanding what we are looking at here. All right. Now, even though this looks like a number, even though this looks like a digit, because it's enclosed in quotation marks, Python is going to interpret this as a string. Because it's enclosed in quotation marks, Python is going to interpret this as a string. So that's really awesome. I'm really glad that we got that right. I'm really glad that we got that right. All right. Next concept we'll be looking at is something called variables, right? Something called variables. So I'm going to add a new markdown so we know we've proceeded into a new section in the class, right? We've proceeded into a new concept. So we'll be looking at something called variables. We'll be looking at something called variables. Now, variables are basically containers, right? Think of the containers in your kitchen. I don't know why I'm using kitchen scenarios today. Right, so think of the containers in your kitchen. I believe every one of us has jars in our kitchen to store certain food ingredients. For some of us to store spices for cooking, for some of us to store many different things basically in our kitchen, right? To store cookies and so on. And for some of us in Nigeria, right, for very typical Nigerian homes, where you would find bowls of ice cream used to store soup in the freezer, right? Think of variables like those containers that you have in your kitchen. All right. Think of variables like those containers that you have in your kitchen. And these variables or these containers are able to contain any kind of thing you want, right? Whatever you want, right? The same, like I mentioned, right? The same bowl that was used to buy ice cream can also be used to store soup in the freezer. All right. So think of variables like those containers you have at home, right? That you can basically have whatever you want in those containers. All right. Some of us have cookie boxes, right, or cookie containers that end up becoming sewing kit storage boxes, right? So think of variables as storage containers. They can only hold a specific kind of data at a time, and they can only hold one kind of data at a time. All right. Variables are basically containers that can only hold one kind of item at a time. They can only hold one kind of item at a time. So I made an example with the um, bowl of ice cream that ends up becoming a bowl for storing soup in the freezer. All right. It can only contain one item at a time. What that means is when you have ice cream in it, you can't have ice cream and your soup in the same bowl, right? As soon as you want to add your soup into the bowl, you have to take out the ice cream and then have the soup into the bowl. That's how variables work. They're basically containers that can hold any kind of data. However, they can only hold one kind of data at a time. For example, we can have a variable like name, all right? We can have a variable like name. This is a typical variable, right? Very conventional name, right? And I can pass in any data type. I can pass in 10, which is a data type that Python understands. I can pass in 10.5, which is another data type that Python understands. And I can also pass in a string of text, all right? I can type my name, Jedediah, name equal to Jedediah. This is how variables exist. You have a variable name, you have the assignment operator, and then you have the value you are assigning to the variable. All right? The variable name is the name you are attaching to your container now. And then you have the assignment operator to basically command Python. I want to add this value to this variable. I want to attach this value to this variable. So the name here indicates the variable name. The equal to here is the assignment operator. And then Jedediah is the value I want to put in that variable, which is that container, right? If I run this, Python executes this, it creates a container called name, which is the variable now. It creates a container called name. And what it stores in that container is what I passed in here, which is Jedediah. So whenever I call that particular container, whenever I call that particular name, I pass in name, for example, Python is going to return whatever value I have stored in there, which is Jedediah. Okay, we can see that here. I called in Jedediah and I stored a particular value into Jedediah. And as soon as I called the variable, which is the container name, it returns Jedediah. Now, as soon as I pass in a new name, as soon as I pass in the same container and I decide to pass in a new variable, for example, I pass in Fred, right? The same container name, and then I pass in a new value. I run this cell. You remember initially I passed in Jedediah into the container. As soon as I pass in Fred and I run name, Python no longer recognizes Jedediah in this container. What it now holds is Fred. What it now holds is Fred. Fred asked the question, can the container name have Jedediah, Fred, and Mariam at the same time? No, it cannot. You can have different containers for different items, but you cannot have one container containing multiple items, right? You cannot have one container containing multiple items. Also, keep in mind, right, that you can actually trick the name container to store those items for you. All right. You asked if we can have the name or our container containing different names. Jedediah, Fred, Mariam. We can pass all of this as a single string. Okay? We can pass all of this as a single string, or we can pass it in as a list. All right. We are not going to be looking at lists in today's section. All right. We are going to be focusing on the three major data types that we have just looked at and how we are going to be interacting with them. All right. Just keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier, that this container only stores one kind of value at a time. All right, one kind of value at a time. If it's storing a string, it can only store one string. Okay, if it's storing a float, it can only store one float at a time. If it's storing a list, it can only store one list at a time. All right, so that's it on variables. It's able to store different data types, and as soon as we call that data type, right, as soon as we call that value, it's able to, as soon as we call the variable, I mean, it's able to retrieve the value we want. if, for example, I decided to assign an account balance, I decide to create a new variable and assign my account balance to $1 million, and I run this, right? Now this container has been created and the value it stores is this value here. As soon as I call account balance, and I run this cell, you can see that Python returns the actual account balance that was assigned to this variable. All right, like we've seen, a variable is basically a box, right? A container that stores one value at a time. Now, with that established, there are a couple of rules when developing or when assigning a variable. All right, to save us time, I'm going to drop this list of rules here and then walk us through them one by one. All right, so I'm going to drop the list of rules in here. All right, that help us to have a better understanding of how variables operate. The very first rule we have here is that variable names must start with a letter or an underscore. Variable names must start with a letter or an underscore. So we cannot have a variable name starting with a number or any other kind of characters, right? Variable names can only start with a letter or an underscore. A variable name cannot start with any other character. All right. So take for example, Tenalytics is an established brand, and the name Tenalytics obviously starts with a number. All right. So if we had a value to say, oh, Tenalytics has trained over 10,000 participants, and we want to assign the total number of participants that Tenalytics has trained. Say we say Tenalytics. We want to create a variable to say Tenalytics participants. Right, we can't create a variable like this, right? This is a variable, we want to assign a variable with the name Tenalytics. We can't start a variable this way, all right? So a variable name cannot start with a number like this. If we decide to assign a variable 10,000 and we run the cell, you'll notice that it's going to throw an error, invalid decimal literal, all right? Python will try to interpret this 10 here as an actual value. It will try to interpret this 10 over here as an integer. Remember, we've looked at data types, right? And this 10 here, Python will try to interpret it as an integer. But what we are trying to do here is assign a variable. And Python would not recognize that, all right? So from the rules of variable assignment and in Python, in order for you to name a variable, it has to either start with a letter or an underscore. All right, variable names cannot start with a number. Now, the only allowed characters when assigning a variable name are underscores and numbers. All right, underscores and numbers. I know I mentioned you can't have numbers at the beginning of your variable name. Even with that said, you can actually have numbers attached to your variable name at the end or even in between, right? No other kinds of characters can be added in your variable name except for underscores and numbers, and these numbers have to come in between your variable name, right? So for example, if I wanted to type in name, okay, so we already have a variable called name, right? And if I run this, that should give us Fred. Great. The name gives us Fred. If I wanted to create a new variable so that I have a unique one for Jedediah and I have another one for Fred, we know that name contains Fred. I can name this name 2 and then assign a new string here, and I can call it Jedediah. All right. So if I run this name 2, that will return Jedediah. Okay, let me call that out. Name 2. And if I run this cell, it's going to return Jedediah. All right, so we have two cells. We have two variables now. We have name, which returns Fred, and then we have name2, which returns Jedediah. And these are two variables that store different strings of data. So yeah, we've seen what variables are and the kinds of data that they can actually store. Variables are basically containers for storing different data types, and they can only store one data or one piece of data at a time. Right? If they're storing a list, they can only store one list at a time. And we've seen some of the functions that exist here. right? Some of the principles. Variable names cannot start with a number. They can only start with a letter or an underscore. They can only be separated with underscores. And variables are case sensitive. Okay, variables are case sensitive. All right, so if you have a variable called name, and if I decided to create a new variable called name, and I stored the string Mariam in here. I stored the string Mariam in here and I run it. If I call name, you'd see the value that I get, Mariam. And if I call name with a small n this time around and run it, you see the value I get, Fred, right? Even though it's the same spelling, the differences in the syntax helps us differentiate, or Python takes note of the differences in the syntax. Python is case sensitive. This name is spelled with a capital N, and so Python interprets it as a unique variable. And this other name, even though it's the same word, but because of the differences in the casing, this is recognized as a completely different variable. So yeah, variables are case sensitive, and Python generally is case sensitive. Now, the last principle we have here is that variable names cannot be Python keywords. Cannot be Python keywords. All right. For example, we've looked at the type function. All right. The type function that helps us to check the different data types. All right. So type 10, and this gives us the data type of this value we passed in. All right. If we wanted to assign a variable and call it type, right? So we type in type and we decide to call it, um, let's say Deborah. We create a variable called type and we decide to assign a value Deborah to it. If we run this cell, Python is going to throw in an error, right? Python would not accept this, and the reason is because type is an inbuilt function in Python, right? It's going to throw in an error for us because type is an inbuilt function in Python, and it's going to cause confusions, right? It's going to cause confusions if we keep this within our notebook. So it's very important that we avoid the use of it's very important that we avoid the use of Python keywords when naming our variables. So if we pass in type Deborah, run this, it returns string. All right, so you can see the issue here. We can see the issue here, right? I created a variable, called it type, and now that I'm using that same variable and I pass in a function, it's giving me an error, right? If I come back to this cell and run the same thing, you can see that it's now giving me an error. It's now giving me an error. And why is that so? The type function is no longer working as it's supposed to. And that's because I've assigned a variable to this particular data type. Right? I've assigned a variable to this particular Python keyword name. Right? So this is one of the principles of working with data types and working with variables. All right. So that's established. I'm going to need to restart my entire notebook. How do we know Python keywords? So as soon as you start programming, you get familiar with some of these Python keywords. For example, keywords like print, right? This is a Python keyword we're going to be looking at shortly, right? Keywords like type. We've seen this and we've been able to understand that type is a function that exists in Python, all right? We'll, as soon as you start writing your lines of code, you begin to understand and begin to pick up on some of these Python keywords and understand what they are, how they work, and um, knowing that you should not use these as variable names, right? So we've seen the type function already. We've used it before. Now you know that type is a keyword in Python. So I cannot name my variable type, right? Any other keyword that exists in Python, because you know you're going to be using this particular keyword, you keep it at the back of your mind that I cannot use this keyword to assign a variable name, right? Please give me a thumbs up if it's making sense and just respond in the chat while I restart this entire notebook, right? Because we've assigned a keyword here, we have to restart the entire notebook so that that particular cell no longer exists. All right, so we are restarting the entire session. Thank you, Collins. All right, so I'm going to go back to the cell where I actually defined that variable and delete it so that it doesn't run again. Okay, so this is it. All right, so thank you for all the responses. So I would need to restart my entire notebook and run everything over again. So run the cell, run the cell, run the cell, run the cell, run the cell. All right, so I think we're good at this point. Let me just start from variables, name, right, account balance, account balance. All right, so analytics cannot be created as a variable. All right, great, great. So I believe everything is on track now. Everything is on track now. All right, so we're not going to run the cell anymore, and let's try to run the type function this time. Type 10, and it gives us the right output. All right, type 10, and it gives us the right output. So we fixed our notebook. We can proceed and skip this line of code. Let me just clear out everything. And yeah, the cell is fine. The cell is fine. So if we type in the type function, also I mentioned earlier, Python is case sensitive. So if I type in type with a capital T, if I type in type with a capital T, and I type 10, you see it gives me an error because Python does not recognize type with a capital T. But as soon as I switch that to a small t and run it, Python recognizes it and is able to interpret the code I'm writing out. All right, so that's it on variable assignments and principles of creating an actual variable. Right, the principles of creating an actual variable. All right, very quickly we'll be proceeding into creating a couple of variables and seeing how we can interact with them. We'll also be looking at two new Python keywords and functions that we can actually use in Python. All right, so we've seen different variable types, right? We've seen different variables and how we can assign different values to them. All right, so let's create new variables. Let's create new variables. All right, let's start with typing in a name. We can type in a name. Let me type in Jedediah. Remember, Jedediah is a name, so I need to pass it as a string of text so that Python is able to operate on this. And if I run this or I call out name, Python recognizes that data type that has been saved and is able to execute it and return that value to me, right? I can type in something like account. I think this should be 2C. Account balance equal to 1 million. And if I run this, Python is able to retrieve a value for me. All right, so Python recognizes these two data types and is able to retrieve a value for me. How about specifying the currency that data that this account balance is? All right, so I'll call a new variable currency and just indicates that this is in, then pass a string and say it's in USD. All right, so Jedediah has $1 million US. All right, so let me call that variable and see what it returns. If I call that variable, Python recognizes the variable and returns the outcome. And I can also add a new variable and call it age. And let's say Jedediah is 29 years old. If I run this cell, Python recognizes that data type. And once I call age, Python is able to retrieve a value for me. Right, so far, we have successfully created 4 different variables, and we've been able to get an output after calling those variable names. All right, let's combine all of these into a single cell. Let's combine all of these into a single cell. So we have the name Jedediah, account balance in million, currency USD, and the age 29, right? And the age being 29. We can basically copy all of this, can basically copy all of that and paste them in a completely new cell and start interacting with these values. Now, we'll be getting introduced to a unique function called print. All right, but before I do that, let me first of all have all of the values we just created. So name is Jedediah. Let me paste out everything. Right, so the name is Jeddah, age 29, account balance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the currency, let me make that USD. All right, so if I run this cell, we now have all of these values successfully saved. Now, I'll be getting us introduced to a function in Python called the print function. The print function. The purpose of the print function is basically to display whatever you pass in. Right? Remember, we've created a couple of variables with our containers holding these different data types for us. And as soon as we call the print function and we pass in any variable at all, whatever value that has been attached to that variable, Python is able to print that out for us. So take, for example, we have the name Jedida, we have the age, we have balance and currency. If I wanted to retrieve the name, I can simply pass in the print function and then I pass in name. All right. Now take note of the way I typed in name. I pass in name without any quotation mark, and that is because I am not passing in a string. Rather, what I'm passing in is a variable called name. So if I run this, whatever has been attached to the variable name is retrieved, and that is Jedediah. All right. If I ask Python to print, and then I pass in name, but I pass that in quotation marks, Python interprets that as a string of text. So when I run this, it will print out the string name rather than the variable containing this particular value. All right. So when you're passing in a variable, you pass in the variable name the same way it was created. And if you want to pass in a string, remember to always use the quotation marks. All right. So print name. The print function basically displays whatever you command it to display. If I wanted to create a visualization in Python, all I need to do is pass in that visualization, probably assign it to a variable, and then passing the variable name, Python would go ahead to print out whatever is attached to a variable name. All right. So if we clear this out and ask Python to print age, for example, and I run this cell, Python is able to print out the age, right? Print age, and what value was assigned to that variable age, that was 29. Python is able to print that out for me, right? So whatever value is assigned to a variable, Python interprets and is able to retrieve that for us. All right. If you're following, please give me a thumbs up. If you're following, please give me a thumbs up. If you're following, please give me a thumbs up. Fantastic. Fantastic. That's awesome. Awesome. Now we've established that the print function is able to give us an output. All right. It's able to give us an output depending on the variable that was assigned to the print function. All right. What if I want to attach a string along with that particular variable? Right. So I want to probably have like a written message to say, hello, Jedediah, your account balance is that. All right. And these values have already been, my name as well as my account balance has already been saved in different variables. But I want to write out a print function that is able to pick up these variables and whatever value has been assigned to these variables to display them. Right. I basically want to make my code a little more interesting and make it interactive. Right. I can pass in a print statement. There are a couple of ways to do that actually, but I'm just going to be showing us one simple way. Right. I'm just going to be showing us one simple way. Right. Remember what I want to print is a string of text, but I also want to attach my variables in that particular string of text. Right. So I want to say, hello, Jedediah. Hello, Jedediah. Good evening. Your account balance is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.89 USD. Right. Hello, Jedediah. Good evening. Your account balance is this amount. And if I run this cell, it's able to give me that outcome. Hello, Jedediah. Good evening. Your account balance is this amount. Now, changes are bound to happen in our account balance, obviously, because I'll make transactions, right? And most likely the bank is going to take charges as well. All right. I've been able to print out, I've been able to send out a print statement. Print out, hello Jeddah, good evening. Your account balance is this amount and the currency is in USD, right? And Python is able to interpret that and give me an outcome. Hello Jeddah, good evening. Your account balance is this amount, right? In order to make this code a little more interactive, right? In order to make this code a little more interactive, I can use these predefined variable names and attach them to this print statement so that if any change happens in that variable name, as soon as I run the print statement is able to adjust to whatever changes happened in the actual variable, right? So this print statement is fixed, right? It has been hard coded. Print, hello Jeddah, good evening, your account balance is this and that. If a different user comes in, for example, if Collins comes in and runs this same code or interacts with this code, it's going to print hello Jeddah, good evening, your account balance is this, right? And that's because this has been hard coded, all right? We need to make this interactive so that it can change when a new user comes in, all right? Whenever a new user updates their information, Python is able to adapt to that new information and give us a new kind of output, all right? So what I'm going to do is simply come in here, copy this entire string of text and paste it in here, right? And then I'm going to make slight changes, all right? I'm going to make slight changes. Remember, we had a variable assigned to save the name, all right? We had a variable called name assigned to save the name, all right? So I'm going to type in that variable name here, name, and the account balance. We also have a variable assigned to save the account balance. So I'm going to delete this and replace it with accounts underscore balance. All right. And then lastly, USD, we also have a variable assigned holding the currency, right? Or the currency for this particular
I think the
value.
variable name is balance, not account balance.
Okay, thank you. The variable name is balance. Thank you. The variable name is balance. And then lastly, we have the currency, which is going to be currency, which is going to be currency. Now, if I run this, Python still recognizes this as a string. Right? It's not interpreting name here as this variable name, which we have assigned here. It's not yet recognizing this as the variable name which we have assigned. We can see balance here, the account balance here, which is actually the variable we are trying to call. Python is still recognizing this as a string of text. Right? Python is still interpreting this as a string of text. It does not yet recognize it as this variable we are trying to call. And that's because everything is enclosed in quotation marks. In order for us to make sure that Python understands that the name here we are referring to is this variable, the balance we are referring to is this variable, and also the currency we are referring to is this variable, right? I mentioned earlier that there are different ways, but I'm going to stick to just one of them, right? For us to have this executed within our code, what we can do is come before the string starts, right? The same print statement, but just before the quotation mark, before the opening quotation mark for where the string starts, add an F. Add an F in there. Just before the quotation marks for that particular string, you add an F. And now for each of those variable names, right? For each of those variable names like name, balance, and currency. For name, balance, and currency, we want those to be actual variables rather than strings of text. What we are going to do is ensure that those variables are closed in curly brackets. We want to make sure that those variables are closed in curly brackets. So we have name in here. I would make sure that I have name in curly brackets, right? So you see that name has now been put in curly brackets, and you can see that the color changes. And that's because Python now recognizes this not as a string of text, but rather as this variable called name. All right. If I run this cell now, you'd see it says, hello, Jeddah, good evening. Your account balance is balance currency. All right. So it's able to know that what I'm trying to call here is not a string called name. Instead, I'm calling that actual variable I created earlier called name. Please give me a thumbs up if this is making sense. If this is making sense. Fantastic. So we are all on track. We are all on track. The function f is just a It's just a notation. It's called an F string, just to indicate to Python, oh, whatever string you see here are most likely going to have variables inside. So you put the F in front of the string, and that basically indicates to Python that in this string, whatever you see in curly bracket is basically a variable. Whatever you see in curly bracket is a variable. So whatever value is assigned to that variable, I want you to fill it in there. Right. So for example, you see name over here. Because we have the F in front, we are telling Python that whatever you see in curly bracket is a variable. And you can see name over here in curly brackets. So Python is going to check, have we saved any variable called name? If we have, it's going to print out that particular value. All right, so you can see hello, instead of printing out Jedediah, because we have name over here and it's in curly brackets, it's going to check, oh, what was the last value we assigned to name? That's Jedediah. So it's printing out Jedediah. All right, so the same happens for balance. Hello, Jedediah, good evening. Your account balance is balance. Remember, balance is a variable we are trying to call. All right, so we want to make sure that this is also put in curly brackets. Your account balance is dash, and the currency as well, it's a variable, so we want to make sure that that is also in curly brackets. Now if we run this line of code, it says hello Jedediah, good evening, your account balance is 123,000, okay, 1,234,567 USD. All right, so we can see that we are able to attach variables within our print statement, and Python is able to interpret it all and give us an output. Right, give me a thumbs up if you are finding Python interesting so far. Give me, just type a 1 in the chat if you are finding Python interesting so far. If you feel this is still confusing, I don't understand what Jedediah is doing, right, you can type in a 0. Type in a 1 if this is all making sense. Fantastic, fantastic. So we are able to see that we can embed certain variables within our code, right? And Python is able to ensure that it adapts to these values and prints them out for us. All right. Now, remember, the purpose for doing this was to make sure that our code was interactive, right? The purpose for doing this was to make sure that our code was interactive. Now, this will basically adjust to whoever comes in. Whoever comes in as a new user and runs this same line of code is going to give us a completely different output. All right. So if I added a new cell above, right, we are going to have new values. We're going to add in new values, right? I'm going to copy everything here. I'm going to copy everything here, paste it in here, but then we're going to have completely new values. So let's say we have a new customer. Let's call this customer Shei. We have a new person coming in, Shei, and Shei is 32 years old, and Shei has over 10 million. Shei has over 10 million naira in his bank account. Shei has over 10 million naira in his bank account. If I run this cell and I come in here to run this new cell, is going to adjust, right? It's going to adjust to those values that we have. If I come back up here and run the same cell we had previously, you see that this is hard-coded and it does not change, right? Even though the name is changing, it's Shei that's coming to interact with our code this time around. The values there are stagnant. But because we are using the variables instead, as soon as these variables get updated, it's going to print whatever value was assigned to these new variables. So because the name we now have is Shei, the age we now have is 32, the balance we have is 10 million, and the currency is Naira, our code is able to adjust to these new variables or to these new values that have been assigned to these variables and gives us the right output. Right. So no matter who comes in, they have to update the actual code, right? They have to update the actual code, and that becomes an issue. That becomes another level of issue, all right? As much as this gets updated or the print statement gets updated with whatever value we are passing in, it becomes an issue to actually make this code interactive. And that's where the input function comes in. The input function comes in. This input function makes our code a step further, being more interesting and more interactive. The input function basically requests for an input from the user, and whatever input the user passes in is now going to be assigned to the variable. All right. So if I pass in the input function, for example, or if we pass in the name function, basically whatever value we pass in is going to be attached to this particular variable. So if I pass in the name function, I can now use the input function. I pass in the name variable. I can pass in the input function, and this is basically going to request for the user to pass in their name, right? If I run this cell, you can see that it's asking me for an input value. If I type in Chukwuemeka and I hit enter, now Chukwuemeka has been assigned to the variable name. Whenever I call name, oh, sorry, okay, that was in markdown. Let me add a new code cell. Now that I've assigned Chukwuemeka to that variable, as soon as I call name, you see the value it returns is Chukwuemeka as a string. Right? So the input function is able to request for an input from the user. Right? So this time around, you don't need to come back to the actual code as the developer to make any changes to what the actual code looks like. You can basically save it like this, and whoever comes to interact with this code can actually include their own values, right? And this print statement is able to customize the message and give them a much more customized and detailed message tailored to their own actual data, right? So the input function is able to accept variables from the actual user. The input function is able to accept variables from the actual user, or accept input from the actual user. All right. So if I run this input function again and it's asking me, you can see it brings up a box. I can basically type in John, right? And as soon as I hit enter, it now assigns John to this particular variable name. And when I call name, it prints out John. All right. As soon as I call name, it prints out John. Now, the flaw with having it this way is that there's no context to the user on what exactly they are passing in. There's no exact context to the user on what exactly they are passing in. When I run this cell, you see that all it brings out is a blank box that does not exactly tell whoever is typing here what exactly they are expected to type, right? It does not tell them what they're expected to type. So even though the variable name assigned here is name, right? The input allows them to type in whatever they want. So this person can come in here and type in 10,000, right? And as soon as they run this, right, and I come here to run the cell, name, you see what it returns? 10,000, all right? So we can see that the input gives no context to the user on what exactly they are supposed to enter, right? So two things we can observe here. First off, there's no context to the user on what exactly they are expected to type in. And secondly, you would notice that when I called name, the value I'm getting is 10,000. But there's something else you can observe. You'll notice that this 10,000 is enclosed in quotation marks. This 10,000 here is enclosed in quotation marks. And what that simply means is that Python is recognizing this 10,000 as a string. Python is looking at this 10,000 as a string of text and not an actual digit, not an actual value, right? So for us to add code it in here to inform Python that the value we're actually trying to send in is a string or is an integer or is a float, we have to specify the data type. And to do that, we would be passing the input function inside the specific data type we want. So for example, the name we are expecting is meant to be a string. All right, the name we are expecting is meant to be a string. What we are going to simply do is pass in str and then ensure that our input function is inside that string function. So I'm going to clear this out and do it again. So to pass in the name, we have to specify the data type first. So str indicating that what we want is an actual string. And then inside that str function, that is when we pass in our input function. That is when we pass in our input function. That's when we pass in our input function. If we run this, right, we can see that Python now gives us that same box and we can type in whatever we want. And anything we type in is going to be saved as a string. If we run this cell, it gives us this value as a string. All right. If we wanted to take age, for example, so age is equal to, let me repeat the same process. All right, let me repeat the same process and paste this in, but let me correct this. Now we are taking in the age. What should be the correct data type for age? Just type in the chat, what should be the correct data type for age? We've looked at 3, the string, the integer, and float. What should be the correct data type for age? Thank you. Int. The age should be an integer, right? Your age, no one can be 10.5 years old, right? That's it. It's not practical to say I'm 10.2 years old, right? You just confuse the person you're talking to. How do they translate 10.2 years old? Right? So we can specify the data type and say int because we want our value to be an integer, and we can now close our brackets. Right? Now we have the int function. We can now pass the input function inside the int function, right? So once we run this basically specifies the data type. So if the user decides to be stubborn and types in actual text, right, and types in Jedediah here, Python is going to throw an error. Python is going to throw an error, and that's because we have specified the data type that we are expecting to be an integer. And because the particular value that the user is passing in is a string, Python cannot interpret that, so it's going to pass in an error. To correct that, we have to make sure that we are passing the right data type or the right kind of value to the input function, right? And the way to ensure that our users are passing in the right value is to pass in an actual string inside that input function. That way, our user has context on what exactly they are typing in, right? So for example, the age here, we are requesting for an integer value, right? And we pass in an input function. If I run this cell again, we just see a blank cell expecting the user to type in something, but there's no context on what exactly the user should type, whether it should be their name or their age or whatever it is that we're expecting the user to type in. So if they decide to go ahead to type in any random text, it's going to throw an error and our code will not work fine. To give our user context, we can come inside the input function, pass in a string, and actually now type in an instruction. Enter your age. Enter your age, right? And we pass that in as a string. We pass that in as a string. Now, when we run this, you see that it brings up the same box, but this time around with a small bit of text, right? That gives the user a bit more context. Enter your age. Now, whoever sees this knows that, oh, what I'm expected to type in here is not my name. What I'm expected to type in here is not my account balance, but rather my age. All right, so type in your age, and this person can decide to type, oh, I am 45 years old, hit enter. And as soon as we call age, Python recognizes that value that was assigned to the variable age and is able to print out 45 for us. So the same happens for the name, right? You can pass in a string inside the input function after specifying that the data type we are expecting is a string. You can now pass in, enter your name. All right, enter your name in a string. Everything is enclosed in a string. And as soon as we run this, it will request the user to enter their name, right? So if Ola is the one interacting with this now, all Ola needs to do is just come in and type his name because the instruction is clear. Enter your name. Ola enters this, and we now know that the name Ola has been assigned to the variable name. And whenever we call name, the value that we get is going to be Ola. The value that we are going to get is going to be Ola because Ola has been assigned to that particular variable. If this is making sense, just type in a 1 in the chat. If you're following and this all makes sense, type in a 1 in the chat. So this has given us an introduction to the print statement as well as the input function, right? So these are two very vital functions that are going to help us in tonight's session. We've looked at the print statement as well as the input function. Fantastic. I'm glad that everyone is carried along and is on track. Everyone is carried along and is on track. Now imagine you go into the market, right? Imagine moving into the market to buy certain items. All right, so you purchase an item, item underscore 1. Let's just name this item 1. Right. Let's assume you go into the market to buy an item, item 1, right? And we can basically pass in an input function. Item 1 costs, how much does the item cost? Enter the second item cost, enter the third item cost. We can basically define these different variables, all right? And then request for the input from the user, right? Request for the input from the user. We can now calculate the total amount. We can now calculate the total amount, and this can be calculated by summing up the price of each value. So we can say item 1 plus item 2 plus item 3, right? Item 3, and we can say print the total amount is total amount, right? We can now ask Python to give an output of everything that we have purchased, right? So we have successfully purchased 3 different items that cost different amounts, right? And we have asked Python to calculate the total amount by summing up the price of each individual product. And as soon as it's done, we have also given a print statement here to print a string that says your total amount is, and then attach the total amount value in here using the f string method. All right. Type a 1 in the chat if this code makes sense. Type a 1 if this code makes sense. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we have a variable name. These are concepts we've already looked at. The variable name. We also have the input function, which asks enter first item. All right. We have the second variable name, item 2, which asks input enter second item. All right. We can just adjust this to be item costs. Enter second item costs. Enter second item cost. So it gives a little more context. And lastly, what we can also do is to specify the data type, right? We are expecting float, right? We are talking about money this time around. So the value can actually exist as, or the value can actually exist as a decimal value, all right? Depending on the denomination of the currency. So yeah, we can have float. So we can have float. To specify the data type within our code. All right, so let me just complete that for the last line. Total amount is equal to item 1 plus item 2 plus item 3. Now, when we run this code, Python is going to ask enter the first item cost. If the first item costs $10, we can pass that in. Enter the second item cost. Let's say the item costs $150. We can pass that in. And lastly, enter the third item cost. Third item costs 3,450, 345.66. We hit enter. Python is able to calculate all of that and say the total amount is $505.66. All right, so Python is able to successfully collect all of these variables we've assigned and perform a specific kind of calculation on these variables that we have assigned. Right, so this is very basic, and this can be used in a counter, right, to basically calculate the cost of every single item that a customer buys. Right, this becomes very practical and very useful in situations like supermarkets, right, ensuring that we are able to keep track of the cost of every single item, right, as well as ensure that we are recording the total amount, calculating it, telling the user, and then allowing them to select their mode of payment, make payments, and then leave. Right. This reduces the strain on trying to do all the calculation using your head. You can basically type in the value or the amount spent on each product, and then our code is able to calculate everything and give us an output. All right. So this is basically a simple and easy way for us to ensure that our code remains interactive and ensure that we are able to understand better how Python codes work and how we can simplify and automate certain kinds of processes as we use the programming language Python. If you have been learning so far and you've enjoyed the session so far, can you kindly type in a 1 in the chat? Let me see those of us have enjoyed so far and we have actually learned a thing or two from tonight's session. Fantastic, fantastic. That's awesome. So I'm super glad that we are enjoying this session so far. Thank you, Hundo, Choji. Thank you, Paul, Dayo, Lucky. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. It's been exciting to have us all in tonight's session, right? So we are going to be wrapping up in a moment, but we are going to be looking at a couple of few things that I have also prepared for us before we wrap up the session. All right, so it's been a fun session. I've enjoyed every bit of it, and I'm sure you have as well. Right, I'm going to be sharing my screen briefly so we can pick up where we left off on our slides. Right, please confirm with a thumbs up if you can see my slides. All right, fantastic. Fantastic. So we've gotten an introduction to Python. We've also gotten to understand some basic concepts in Python. We've also gotten to see how we can interact with code. We've gotten to see how we can create interactive codes that allow our users to actually interact with the code, and that makes our job a lot easier. So if a new user comes in, we don't need to start updating the entire code again, right? So we can basically pass in the input function, request for an input from the user, and as soon as they pass in their input, our code is already built into the automated and basically function on its own, right? So that's the essence, and we have been able to see a very practical way to actually conduct our work. All right, so I got a lot of thumbs up and a lot of ones. I don't think I saw any zero at all, right? So that's just evidence that Python is very, very easy to learn, right? Python is very, very easy to learn. And like I said, here at Analytics, we would practically be holding your hands through the entire journey, right? I want to welcome us all, especially into 2025. All right. We are still in January and it's still the beginning of a new year. I'm sure that a lot of us probably wrote down our goals and aspirations for the year. All right. The celebrations for Christmas and New Year and all festivities are finally over, and a lot of us are back to work. A lot of us are back to work. The celebrations are over, and it's time to work. So I want to especially welcome us all back to 2025. Now, some of us might have already written our goals and aspirations for the year. I probably tabled down all of this, right? And probably one of the things you've put down on your goals for the year is to break into tech. But then you're confused on which tech career you should get into, right? Which tech career can I get into that would actually guarantee that I would get a job, right? You might have gone on the internet, you've seen quite a number of them, but then you are undecided because there's a plethora of options out there. You're undecided. I want to help you make this decision, right? I want to give you a little more context or shine a little more light on a very interesting field here that would help you to break into tech, and not just break into tech, but also be able to make that big bucks that you're also aspiring. All right. And this field is the field of data science and machine learning. This is one of the top recruiters. This is one of the top field currently in the job market today. All right. If you go on the internet and search for the high in demand skills today, right, you would find out that data science is one of the top fields that are currently in demand, right? These are just a couple of blogs that are evident to this fact, right? You can click on the slides here, right? Like I mentioned, this slide is going to be provided to you, so you can have a more detailed read into these blogs, right? We've also taken initiative, all right, to explore WEF, right, World Economic Forum analysis. And now this is an analysis that is done every single year by the World Economic Forum. And they basically detail out certain jobs that they believe are in demand based on their analysis and based on their findings. So they collect a lot of data across the globe and they're able to outline the jobs that are in demand. And you can see some of these jobs highlighted here. Now, these are jobs that you would be able to break into when you get into the data science program here at Analytics. With the skills and knowledge that you would gather in data science, you'll be able to successfully break into any one of these fields. You can see big data specialists, fintech engineers, big data specialists. You can see AI and machine learning specialists. You can already see two of them within the top 5. All right, you can already see two of these roles that you can break into within the top 5 already with the skills that you can gather on the full stack data science program. You can see autonomous and electric vehicle specialists. I mentioned earlier, I hinted towards computer vision, and this is one of the concepts you're going to be learning on the program, right? And these skills can be applied in this particular industry. You would also find data analysts and scientists. Now, these are job roles that are currently in high demand globally. These are current job roles that are in high demand globally, all around the world. You might be wondering, who is a data scientist? All right, so we painted that a data scientist is someone, we painted that data science is the job in trend at the moment, right? But you're wondering, who is a data scientist? What exactly do data scientists do? If I want to get into data science, I should at least understand what exactly I'm putting myself, what I'm getting myself into. Now, a data scientist is a professional, all right, that extracts invaluable insights. All right, thank you. A data scientist is a professional that is able to extract actionable insights from data. Now, a data scientist applies advanced analysis, right, and advanced techniques in order to be able to extract insights from data. You might be asking, what is insight again? What is Jedediah saying? Insights basically refer to certain information that are hidden within your data and are relevant for decision making. All right. Any kind of vital information that is hidden within your data is considered to be an insight. Any information that is useful to you found within your data is considered insight. The job of a data scientist is to extract those insights and able to point out a clear line of action after extracting those insights to its audience or to stakeholders so that they can make the right kinds of decisions. Now, data scientists focus on extracting insights by applying advanced technical skills, right, in analytics, and also applying techniques like machine learning and statistical analysis to solve complex problems. The focus is on extracting insights so that strategic decisions can be made. The role of a data scientist would involve processes like looking at the company data, identifying patterns and trends that might exist within the data. All right. You might look into the data and realize, oh, there's a particular pattern that I've observed over the last couple of years. And we have noticed that there's been a downward trend. All right. Last year we made such amounts, and this year there's a decline in terms of how we are performing. Right. The data scientist is a professional that can be able to look into the data and point out some of those observations, some of those patterns and trends that might exist in the data. It's able to also develop predictive models and algorithms. Some of us would have had interactions with certain predictive models before, maybe even without realizing it. Some of us have probably interacted with models like ChatGPT. All right. Some of us had our Spotify rap at the end of last year. If you had a Spotify rap at the end of last year, can you just type in a one in the chat? At the end of last year, you had the Spotify rap. You had the Spotify wrap up. Let me type in a one because I had one. All right, fantastic. That's interesting. That's interesting. So quite a number of us had Spotify wrap-ups at the end of the year last year. Some of us also interact with YouTube, right? You make use of YouTube to watch videos, probably watch comedy skits or watch movies or going to watch tutorials on how to do certain things, right? You would observe that when you watch a certain video on YouTube and then you come back after a period of time and then you want to watch another video, YouTube will recommend similar videos to you. All right. It could probably even be immediately after you watch the same video. Or I watch a particular video on how to cook rice. And then immediately I finish watching that video, YouTube begins to recommend another video on how to cook maybe beans, for example. Right. If you have experienced something like that, type a one in the chat. Thank you. Dio mentioned even Netflix. You watch a movie and then And immediately that movie ends, Netflix is already recommending a similar movie, right? That's as a result of a predictive model working in the background. Okay. Google, these different platforms are able to look at the patterns or trends in your data, right? They're able to look at the data that exists on the particular movie you just finished watching. What is this movie about? What is the genre of this movie? What other movies have similar characteristics like this one, right? What other movies is this person likely going to be interested in? It's able to track down all of the data that exists for the movie you've watched and then give you a prediction on movies that you might be interested in. That's basically how predictive models work. They learn from existing data in order to make predictions on what possible future outcomes are going to look like. And that's one of the interesting things you can actually do with your skills in data science. Now, the function of a data scientist spans across also performing exploratory data analysis. This is basically focused on digging deeper into your data, all right? Practically conducting in-depth research, in-depth analysis on your data, ensuring that you're able to extract detailed insights that can be used to make strategic decisions that help the business, right? Performing exploratory data analysis is basically an extensive analysis on your data, an extensive exploration of the nature of your data, the insights that exist, and the relationships that might exist within your data. The job of a data scientist does not just end there. You'd also be moving forward to communicate insights through visualizations and reports to your stakeholders. All right. It's very important that you also have a solid knowledge of how to communicate insights effectively and efficiently to stakeholders. Remember that these stakeholders might not be professional data scientists like yourself, but it's very important that you are able to communicate all of your insights and findings to stakeholders. And lastly, like I've detailed here, optimizing processes using data-driven strategies. I mentioned earlier while explaining who a data scientist is, that your focus is on extracting insights that help decisions, that help organizations to drive strategic decisions. All right. So the purpose of your entire analysis is to optimize a process or to highlight a particular strategy that can help optimize that particular process and yield best results, right? Now, these are basically the functions that you'll be performing in as a data scientist or with the skills of a data scientist. And with all of these skills and knowledge, you can actually work in different roles. You can work in different roles that cut across different titles. All right. You would come across roles like data scientist, machine learning engineer, and so on. These are only a few of the different roles you can actually work in with the skills that you're going to be gaining as a data scientist, as a full stack data scientist. And besides that, you're going to be learning key concepts with us here at Analytics, cutting across data cleaning, right? Using Microsoft Excel, you're going to be seeing how you can create interactive visualization using tools like Microsoft Excel and Tableau. All right. We'll also see how we can conduct predictive analytics, right? Just as we've seen with Netflix and YouTube, right? Being able to predict what videos you are likely going to be interested in. And not just that, you can also predict future outcomes for certain financial markets and so on, right? Like I've mentioned, machine learning or predictive analytics focuses on forecasting future events based on the records of previous events. All right. So we'll look at how we can conduct predictive analytics in Excel. We'll also see how we can do that in Tableau and even using machine learning. We'll also be looking at structured query language, right? Which is basically a query language that helps us to interact with databases. Now, organizations would have data stored within a database. And in order for you to be able to interact with that database, you need a specific kind of language that that database actually understands. And that language is called SQL, Structured Query Language. With SQL, you can be able to retrieve data from a database and perform interactions or perform your analysis on that particular data. Organizations will typically store data or collect data from different points, from different sources, And all of this data is housed and stored in a central location. For you to be able to interact with that data, you would need knowledge in SQL. And then we move into Python, right? We have already gotten introduced to Python in today's session. But when we get into the program, we'll be looking at Python even more extensively, right? We'll start from the very basics, learning about data types, right? The different functions and operations that you can perform on the different data types that exist in Python. We'll now move further into creating visualizations in Python, performing exploratory data analysis, and even further into developing predictive models, learning about machine learning, different aspects of machine learning from supervised to unsupervised machine learning. We'll be building different machine learning projects, and you'll also be learning how to evaluate your models and ensure that you're able to deploy these models in a practical work environment. All right, so that users can actually interact with your models and your models can actually be useful to the outside world and it doesn't just end up on your computer. All right, so we'll look at all of these stages, right, of learning and breaking into the field of data science. We'll also be exploring specified um, specializations in computer vision and natural language processing. Now, these are specified areas in machine learning, right? So, would ensure that you are able to have a very robust knowledge and a very solid foundation breaking into the field of data science. The tools you're going to be learning would cut across Microsoft Excel, Tableau. You will be looking at Python and would explore libraries in Python like Pandas, NumPy, and even scikit-learn. All right. I already mentioned SQL, right? So I'm not forgetting that. We are going to be looking at SQL. And like I said, we are going to be looking at computer vision and NLP. So with that in mind, we'll also be introduced to a few more advanced libraries that would help us to actually develop models in these fields. All right. Working as a data scientist, you are focused on extracting insights, developing predictive models, extracting insight, and being able to give detailed or strategic insights or recommendations to businesses so that they can make strategic decisions. And here in Analytics, we are going to be taking you through the entirety of this process, ensuring that you are able to break seamlessly into these fields, right? And we have structured this in such a way that your transition becomes seamless. You'll be starting out by taking live classes, right? We hold live classes for a period of 6 months, right? You will be having a period of 6 months training where you would have classes every weekend. And classes are basically broken into two classes, right? And the essence of this is to ensure that we cater for everyone that is coming in to join the program. All right. We host classes every weekend. We have a morning class that hosts from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. West African time. And this is suitable for participants who would like to take the program from from Europe, from the UK, and even those in Africa. But we also have a specialized session, right? Basically the same session um, posted at 6 p.m., right? For those of us who might be in Canada or in the United States. This is to ensure that we cater for all audiences and ensure that you are able to fit in properly into a time or into a class that is suitable with your own schedule. Right. These classes are hosted on Saturdays. But besides that, we also understand that we have different kinds of learners. We have people that might need to go over a concept over and over again before you actually get a very good understanding of these concepts. And that's why we have the self-paced class, right? Basically called the Watch Me Do It videos. Now, these are bit-sized videos that you get to walk through on Sundays. These are self-paced bit-sized videos that you get to walk through on Sundays. And I need to iterate this and actually mention this, that our Saturday live classes, as well as the Watch Me Do It videos you're going to be watching, are very detailed and are also case study based. What that simply means is that by the time you complete every single class and you complete every single Watch Me Do It videos, you would have completed an entire project that you can have on your portfolio. You would have completed an entire project that you can actually show out to recruiters as proof that you have actually completed this program, that you actually have this knowledge, you are able to apply it in a practical situation, and you have proof of it. All right, so we have a structure that caters for every kind of learner across the globe and ensures that everyone is carried along as you learn on this journey. All right, we have also been able to um, establish two learning pathways. All right, two different learning timelines, and the first allows the program to span for a period of 8 months, and the second for a period of 12 months. Now, the program that spans for a period of 8 months basically entails a 6 month learning period in class where you get to have the What Me Do videos on Sundays and then your live classes on Saturdays, and then a 2 month period of internship. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a special package when it comes to this internship. And secondly, we have the 12-month period, right, where you get to learn for 6 months and then you have a 6 month period of internship. Now, the reason for this, right, or the advantage of taking the 6 month internship period, right, the essence of having the 6 months internship period or the 2 months internship period, in this internship period, you'll basically be working on much more detailed and advanced analytical problems, right? You'll be working on a lot more advanced projects, all right? Like I mentioned before, every class you go through, you're going to be working on an actual case study, which is something you can add on your portfolio. And even on the Watch Me Do videos, you have practical case study where you're working on projects that can be added into your portfolio. So at the end of the program, you have an actual robust portfolio that you can put out there to solidify and reinforce your knowledge in the field of data science. Secondly, we have the internship phase where you'll be working on a lot more advanced projects. And on this internship, you would also have a collection of projects you'll be working on where you get to reinforce these skills that you have gathered on the program and you're able to practicalize them and showcase all of them on your portfolio. All right. Like I mentioned, we have two periods, the 8 month period with a 2 months internship only. All right. The 2 months internship only, and a 6 months 12 months period of the program with 6 months of classes and 6 months of internship. The advantage you have with the 6 months of internship is that you have a lot more time to solidify your knowledge in this field and also build up your skills and understanding in the field of data science. You're able to work on a lot more interesting projects and you're able to reinforce your knowledge as well as gain a higher level of competence in the field of data science. I mentioned that we have a special package when it comes to the internship, and that's that you would have the unique opportunity to include not just Analytics as an organization on your portfolio, but you'd have Analytics and Amdari on your portfolio. Okay, you get to train with Analytics for 6 months, and then if you decide to go for the 12 months program, you get to train, have your internship with Amdari for a period of 6 months. Now, these are two well-established organizations, and like I mentioned, would be practically holding your hands through the entire journey. Right, would ensure that everything is broken down and you get an extensive and robust learning experience, not just learning these concepts and skills, but also practically applying them in the field of data science, practically applying them on real world cases, on real world situations, on real world data. All right. It's very, 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 very much robust, ensuring that you are able to seamlessly break into the world of data science and also ensure that you are properly prepared and ready to break into the world of data science. Now, you might wonder that, oh, I'm just a beginner. I don't know anything about tech. I'm just getting started. I want you to be rest assured that you don't have a problem at all. You're going to be starting out with Analytics. You might be wondering, oh, I don't have much experience. And that's why you're going to be working on a robust collection of projects to reinforce your knowledge, and not just to do that, but to actually showcase your competence in the field of data science and your competence using these tools. All right. Here are a few testimonies of participants that have gone through the program. Right. These are participants, some with no prior experience at all, with no prior knowledge of these tech roles, coming into Analytics and learning these tech skills, and they are able to successfully break into the world of tech. All right, this slide is going to be shared with us, and we'll be able to hear their unique stories of how they were able to break into the world of tech without any prior knowledge in the field of tech. We have a plethora of these testimonials. All right, we would say, as Burna Boy said it, right? You go explain, tire, no evidence. right? But for us here at analytics, we have the evidence, right? We have a lot of evidence to showcase, right? Some of the success stories of participants that we have had so far, right? So we have an interesting story from Igmat, who was a full-time stay-at-home mom, but after moving to the UK, she joined the data analytics program, and after the training, she was able to secure a job as a data analyst with the NHS and also a full visa sponsorship. All right. So we can see success stories, the evidence show, right? So I'll be sharing these slides with you. You will have access to these slides and you'll be able to go over every other testimonials. We have a lot of them. All of these are participants that were able to break into the field of tech after training on the data science program. We have participants who have also gotten jobs while on the program. Even before they complete the program, they already got offers, right? A lot of offers. All right. So you might be wondering, oh, the industry I'm working in does not in any way relate to data science. I'm working in I'm working in healthcare, or I'm working as a teacher, or I've never worked in tech before. That is not an issue at all, right? Regardless of your background, regardless of whatever your background might be, right? The transition into data science is going to be made seamless for you, as we are going to be guiding you through the entire process, right? And I've explained to us that analytics is well positioned to help you make that transition. All right. And as we have already seen here with all of the testimonials available here, right? All of the people we have here have been able to make that transition seamlessly, and so would you. So would you, right? Last year we've had groundbreaking um, we've had a lot of milestones that we crossed in the previous year, one of which was getting part of the catalyzer program in our beta, right? Further solidifying our brand and ensuring that we are properly placed out there, ensuring that we are consistently developing, and ensuring that we are consistently delivering the very best to you, right? And interestingly, at the end of the session, with all of the value that you're going to be getting while on the program, you would also be getting a unique certificate. You will also be getting a special certificate that has been licensed by the American Council of Training and Development. So you're going to be getting an accredited certification at the end of the program. So if you're worried about a certification, don't worry, you're going to get that. You're going to be getting detailed learning. You're going to be getting robust learning. You'd also be getting a robust portfolio that you can put out there, as well as a certificate that has been accredited by a governmental body to verify and acknowledge your level of knowledge, your level of competence, and level of expertise in the field of data science. Now, we are not just focused on helping you to build these technical skills or a professional portfolio. We would also be helping you with also employability skills, right? In order for you to be able to successfully break into the world of tech, you need to also have these employability skills. And that's why we have tailored sessions, we have tailored modules that help you have not just the technical skills, but also the employability skills. And these modules cut across sessions like the CV review session. Now, the CV review session is basically a tailored session where we come in to discuss certain kinds of things that are meant to be placed on a CV, right? How to arrange your CV, how to ensure that your CV is fit and job ready, especially for some of us that might have just recently moved to unique locations or environments that are typically new to us, right? The way a CV is being arranged in the US might be slightly different from the way it's arranged in the UK. And it's very important for us to have a solid understanding of how we can tailor our CV that makes it fit into the environment or job market we are trying to break into. And also for most of us, or for some of us who do not have a background in the world of tech, we are able to see how we can tailor our CV to these job roles that we are applying to, thereby ensuring that we're able to break into this field seamlessly. We also have the LinkedIn optimization session. Now, LinkedIn is a very powerful platform, especially for tech individuals and especially for individuals breaking into a particular field. All right. It's very important that you consistently update your LinkedIn, further position yourself as an ideal tech professional, as an ideal data scientist. You want to make sure that whoever comes to your profile is able to see that and know that, oh, this person is actually a data scientist and is someone who is professional and knows what the field of data science is about. All right. The essence of the LinkedIn optimization is to help you tailor your LinkedIn profile to the particular field that you are trying to break into. In this case, data science, right? I can't mention the number of times I've gotten job offers on LinkedIn, right? Just because of the way my profile is being tailored, right? So we are going to be walking you through how you can actually optimize your LinkedIn profile to attract the right kind of audience. We also have specialized Upwork optimization session for those of us that might be interested in freelancing job, all right, that might be interested in freelancing and do not want an office job, right? So we have Upwork optimization sessions that help you to be able to position yourself for these roles, that help you to break into this field of data science working as a freelancer. We have the navigating the job market session where we help you to perform properly in your role, right? We help you to ensure that you are able to um, perform effectively and efficiently when you actually land a tech role. We have the job and interview preparation session. The essence of this session is to guide you through your interview processes, right? We work with you through reviewing your CV and ensuring that it's fit for the job you are applying to. And after you apply for the job and get an interview, we actually hold sessions with you where we get to help you prepare for that particular interview. It's a one-on-one session, and we get to have conversations with you, guiding you through how you can answer certain questions that are expected in the interview process. We also help you in preparing for the interview process, ensuring that you are able to effectively answer these questions and actually land the job role. And even after you land the job role and the company requests for a reference or recommendation letter, we are more than willing to make that available for you. You can always do that by reaching out and would be more than glad to make that available to you. Now, besides the sessions that are made available, we also have the weekly mentorship session, which is geared towards ensuring that you build some of these soft skills that we discuss, right? Soft skills that are very relevant, especially in the world of tech. We'll be learning about concepts like the sit and star approach that you can use for interviewing and also for presenting your work, especially to stakeholders and in interview situations, right? All of these are tailored to ensure that you have a robust knowledge, robust collection of skills, not just technical skills, but also employability skills. And lastly, we have the on-the-job support. Even after getting the job, we are here and available to ensure that you are getting seamless guidance in ensuring that you are able to execute effectively in your role. Right. The mentorship sessions happen every single week. So you can be sure that every single week you are learning something new for a period of 6 months. You can imagine the wealth of knowledge you'll be ending up with at the end of the program. All right. So be sure to ensure that you do not miss any of these sessions because there's a lot packed in here, right? And there's a lot for you to actually benefit while on the program here at Analytics. With all of this in place, we also have the learning management system, right? The LMS inbuilt for Tenalytics. I've mentioned before that we have Watch Me Do It videos that are sent out every Sunday, all right, for you to ensure that you go over this, have a solid knowledge of the concept you're learning, as well as have worked through an entire project end to end. Now, the learning management systems here at Analytics is where we house all of these materials, right? All of your course materials, as well as the weekly Watch Me Do videos you get on Sundays are made available on the LMS. And just to add a bit of icing on the iceberg, right? At the end of the session, even after you complete the program, you have lifetime access to every single resource that are on the LMS. As long as you enroll on the program, you are able to have lifetime access to all of these resources. If all of this is making sense and you're finding it quite interesting, please give me type in A1 in the chat or type in a word that just expresses how you're feeling about the interaction so far. There's so much packed in already, right? There's so much packed in already from the technical skills you're going to be gaining to the employability skills you're going to be gaining, down to the one-on-one sessions that you would have, as well as the plethora of projects you're going to be working on and an extensive internship period that you're going to be enjoying while on the program. Right, all of this is tailored to ensure that you're able to break seamlessly into the field of tech. I hope this is all exciting. I'm already getting goosebumps already before before getting you into the program. I'm already getting goosebumps already. Right, it's going to be an exciting journey and it's going to be fantastic. I'm sure you enjoyed the interaction we had today on Python. In the program, the discussion is going to be a lot more extensive and much more detailed, and there's going to be a lot more that you're going to be learning from basics all the way to a lot more advanced concepts. All right, so we're excited to have you and we're looking forward to seeing you on the program. On the program. All right, so just as I mentioned, the program is going to be spanning for a period of 6 months, right? For a period of 6 months before you proceed into the period of your internship. Now, our next cohort is going to be starting on the 8th of February. The next cohort is going to be starting next month. We only have a few months into the month of February. Only have a few weeks, a couple of weeks left into the month of February, right? And our next cohort is going to be starting on the 8th of February. And we are going to be ensuring that we are carrying you along, like I've discussed. We are going to be taking advantage of all of the tools and features on all of the concepts that we have put in place, all of the parameters and features that we put in place to ensure that you're able to break in seamlessly. All right. The next cohort is starting on the 8th of February, and we have a special gift for you. I mentioned at the beginning of the session that we have a special package for you. All right. And this special package is a special discount for anyone that is willing to take advantage of the discount offers we are presenting today. I mentioned earlier that we have an 8 month program plan and a 12 month program plan, right? The 8 month program plan basically allows you to go through 6 months of the class and 2 months of the internship, right? And then 6 months of class and then another 6 months of internship, all right? The advantage you have here is that you get to enjoy a 20% discount when you enroll for the session today, right? As soon as you enroll for the session, you get to enjoy a special 20% discount on your payments, right? There's also a difference between the 8 months payment plan and 12 months payment plan. If you're taking the 8 month payment plan, which currently costs $900, you would be paying $750 at a discount of 20%. All right. And you would also have $1,000 to pay if you decide to go for the 12-month program at a discount of 20%. Now, I would always recommend the 12 months program, right? And the reason for that is very simple, all right? The reason for encouraging the 12-month program is because you get a much more extensive experience, all right? So you get a much more extensive experience on the internship. You get a lot more interesting projects to work on that are added to your portfolio. You get to work on real world cases that are added to your portfolio, and you get to showcase these skills and reinforce your knowledge and level of expertise in this field. All right. Now, besides that, you are able to lock in your payment or lock in a slot to the next cohort right now and take advantage of this discount. We also have a structured payments plan made available for you. Now, this is to ensure that you're able to meet up with the payment plan just in case you can't be able to pay $750 at a single go, or you can't be able to pay the entire thousand on a single go, right? We have the installmental payment structure. This is to ensure that you're able to pay month on month. This is to ensure that you're able to pay month on month. For the 8 months program plan, you have a period of 5 months to complete payment, making a payment of $150 every month. Right. So in case you can't pay the complete 750 upfront, you can make installmental payments while you go through the entire program, right? And on the 12 months program, you can also make installmental payments of $125 for a period of 8 months to complete the entire payment plan. All right. I'm going to quickly be walking us through what the payment plan looks like or how we can basically make payments on this platform. All right, give me a moment to stop sharing the screen so I can move us to what the payment structure look like, move us to the payments platform, and how our payments structure is going to look like. All right, so please confirm if you can see my screen. You can just give me a thumbs up to signify that. Thank you, Fred. All right, awesome. So once you click on the link, that would direct you to this web page, right? And on this web page, you basically have a much more detailed breakdown of everything we just discussed. All right, and you can simply move in here to basically pick out the particular course you're interested in, and also look into the program brochure. Right, that way you're able to have a much more robust understanding of what you're breaking into, the potential that lies ahead, right, as well as the potential that lies within you, and what you are out to achieve, what you are bound to achieve if you enroll for the data science program or for any of our programs here at Analytics. Like I've mentioned, you have the 8 month plan and 12 month plan with a difference of $750 for the 8 month plan and $1,000 for a 12 month program on um, data science. Now, on this program, I've mentioned that we have a unique and new cohort starting every single month. However, I would really encourage that you take advantage of the discount that is currently running, right? I would really recommend that you take advantage of the discount that is currently running. That way, you're able to break into this field, take advantage of this discount, and basically start earning these big bucks while spending. This is going to become chicken change compared to how much you are going to be learning after breaking into this field. All right. In order for you to make payment on this platform, you just simply click on Visit Store, and that will take you directly to the enrollment platform. All right. That will take you to the enrollment platform. My colleagues are already dropping the link to get access to this. All right. So you can basically click on the link. All right. And then you can begin to make payments. All right. You can begin to make payments. All right, so we have a new cohort starting every single month, but I'd really encourage that you start payment now so that you can lock in this discount. All right, you might come back next month and the discount is off, right? So I would really recommend that you start making payments now and take advantage of the discount. Now on paying, um, now click on the link, it will bring you up to this site, right? And you basically get to pick out the program you want to enroll for, which is the full stack data science program. All you have to do is simply click on the link, right? And this will take you directly to the program and allow you to make payments. We have the full stack data science 8 month program, and then we have the full stack data science 12 month program. Now on my end is displaying in Naira, and that's because I'm in Nigeria, like I mentioned earlier, right? If you were in the UK, this will be displayed to you in pounds, and if you are in the US, this will come up to you in USD. Depending on the specific location you are in, it will show the currency it will display the currency in the specific location that you are in. You might as well take initiatives to change the currency to whatever currency you deem fit, right? So you get a better understanding of what the payment structure looks like, and you can basically begin to make payments. All right. Analytics is very robust, right? The program is very robust, ensuring that you're able to break in seamlessly. We are here to ensure that your transition journey is seamless, right? And we are here to make sure that this journey becomes easy for you. In order for us to help you do that, we need you to get into the program. So if you're interested in breaking into tech, here's your cue to start making payments. Here's your cue to actually break into the field of data science. We are here to ensure that your journey is seamless and to ensure that you are able to break in seamlessly and get not just the technical skills, but also the soft skills as well as employability skills that would help you properly break into the field of data science. If you have enjoyed the session so far, I'd like you to type in the comments, type in the chat, um, what your opinion is about this session so far. And if you are ready to start making payments now, if you are ready and excited to get into the field of data science, you can just type in good to go. If you're ready to get started, just type in good to go. February is only a couple of days away, right? February is only a couple of days away. The more you defer it, the more changes are likely going to happen, and the more likely you might lose track of this and might not take advantage of this, right? So I'm really recommending that you take advantage of the session, all right? And I'm going to be addressing yes. I know a lot of questions were asked. I'm going to be addressing each one. I believe my colleagues are already responding to some of these questions in the chat already, but I'm going to take our questions and ensure that I do justice to answering as much as possible, right? So if you do have a question, you can use the raise hand gesture, and then I'll be responding to your questions. You can as well type in the chat so I can respond to this question. All right, Colin said, all right, yes, Collins. Yeah, you can just click on the link and follow the process and you should be fine. You should be fine. Yes, Fred. So you'll be meeting with myself as well as other industry experts in the field of data science. Right. So you'll be meeting with myself as well as other experts in the field of data science, other seasoned professionals like myself, who are going to be breaking down everything to ensure that you are carried along and that you actually have robust knowledge in the field of data science. So yeah, as soon as you enroll on the program, you're going to be having interactions with myself and other experts just like me. So yeah, you're going to be meeting me on the data science program. Thank you, Steve Job. Thank you, Steve Job. I'm glad you had an amazing time. All right, so Prof. Kenneth is saying good session, right? Okay. Yes, Prof, you can type your comment in the chat. I'll be looking at each one and responding to every question. I'll be responding to every question. So I'm not sure how to pronounce this name now. WULV, right? Is the Agile program also tech related? Yes, it is, right? The Agile program is also tech related. Now, you would not be working on much technical stuff because the focus of your job as an Agile or Scrum Master is basically ensuring that the entire process is broken down and is made seamless and efficient, right? The essence of your job as a Scrum Master or as an Agile professional is to ensure that the entire life cycle of a particular program is, or of a particular project is made seamless and efficient, attending and addressing the needs of the users and also delivering on whatever the project you're working on is, right? So you might be working on developing a new app, right, that you want to put out there in the market. Your job is basically to ensure that the software engineer delivers on time, that the data scientists also develop their models on time, and that whatever it is that you're modeling is actually market ready and is actually meeting the needs of the market. You are also able to ensure that everyone works together, the collaboration becomes seamless, and then whatever timeline or expectations are set, right, you're able to ensure that the entire process is seamless, efficient, and the expectations are met. So yeah, you get to be working with other tech professionals, and yeah, you are actually going to be working with related tech fields. I hope that answers your question. Right, Fred is asking, the enrollment portal have the enrollment program by default. Looking for where to check it. Just scroll down and you would find the 12 months program. Right, so let me share my screen one more time. Let me share my screen one more time. All right, so you first have all of the 8 months programs, and when you scroll down, you get to find the 12 months program. Right, so you have the 8 month program. Just scroll down and you find the 12 months program. You can see here, full stack data science, 12 months. All right, I hope that was helpful. Okay, so Oluwaseun is asking, what's the difference between data science and data engineering? What's the difference between data science and data engineering? Now, while we had our conversation today, I made mention of the fact that as a data scientist, you'll be writing SQL code and you'll be interacting with a database. Now, that database will need to be developed by someone. The data would need to be gathered and stored in that database by a professional, and the professional responsible for doing that is the data engineer. Data engineers are responsible for building infrastructure for data storage and also infrastructure for interactions with data. So the data engineer is responsible for developing the database, for developing the data warehouse, and ensuring that there's a streamlined process for interacting with this data. Now, the data engineer establishes that storage platform. He also is the architect behind designing the entire workflow for retrieving the data and interacting with it, and how the data gets to be stored and kept. Your job as a data scientist is basically to go to that warehouse that the data engineer has developed and stored the data. Your job is to go there, retrieve the data, perform your analysis, and then present your insights and recommendations. So that's just an um, overview, right? Just a better view of the major difference between the job of a data scientist and that of a data engineer. I hope that makes sense, Oluwaseun. I hope that makes sense, Oluwaseun. Thank you, Steve Jobs, orchestrating ETL pipelines, right? Ensuring that the entire process of retrieving and using data are properly orchestrated by the data engineer. So the data engineer does that process, right? He's in charge of infrastructure and storage of data, and then data scientist is responsible for analysis of that data and communicating findings and insights, right? Ifeoluwa is asking, can a data scientist work as a data analyst? Yes, yes, you can. With the skills and knowledge you'll be gathering, right, you develop skills that cut across different kinds of analytics, as well as developing compelling dashboards and also communicating your insights and findings. I'll be going a step further to much more advanced tools, right, and much more advanced techniques of analysis, from exploratory data analysis to machine learning and specializations in computer vision and natural language processes. So yeah, with your skills and knowledge, you can actually function in the role of a data analyst. Right. Kenneth is asking, please explain how the internship works. Does one have to visit your office facility? No, you do not have to visit a physical facility. So the internship is completely remote, right? The internship is completely remote. The same way the training is, right? Just like the training is completely remote, right? The internship is also going to be completely remote. I mean, I'm in Cardinal today, and we have a lot of interactions with everyone else. Some of us joining all of us joining across the globe, and we are able to have a much detailed conversation. So yeah, the classes are going to run that way as well. They are all going to be virtual sessions, and the internship is also going to be a virtual internship. Okay, so WULV again is currently working in logistics and supply chain. So yeah, would be guiding you through how you can tailor your CV, right, and tailor your previous job experience into breaking into data science. So I actually had an interview prep with someone last week, right, getting a job into supply chain actually. Yeah, I had an interview prep with someone just last week. The person went through the data science program and got an offer in supply chain. Right? So yeah, you're going to be working as a data scientist in the field of supply chain. So yeah, your background doesn't really matter. The skills you're going to be learning still remain relevant, and you can actually um, tailor your previous experiences into the role you're breaking into. Okay. Um, Isima is asking, between data science and data security, which is much easier for someone who has no basic knowledge in tech, right? Data science and data security. Well, both of them have their complexities, both of them have um, their nuances and differences. But yeah, it depends on your specific interests, right? What I would recommend is for you to have a better understanding of what each role is about, and then figure out which one you might be interested in, right? As a data scientist, I've mentioned that you will be much more focused on analyzing your data, extracting insights, and then communicating those insights and giving detailed recommendations to stakeholders. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. So like I was saying, a data scientist, your focus will be on extracting insights from data, communicating your findings, and then being able to ensure that you are also give data-driven recommendations to stakeholders. However, as a data security expert, your focus is on safeguarding the data, all right? Your focus is on ensuring that no one is able to break in and actually steal the data within the organization. Organizations pay billions of dollars just to have access to public data. Right? There are organizations that are paying a lot, right, to collect user data. Right. So it's very important for every organization to safeguard their data. So that's where the data security expert comes in, right? Ensuring that the infrastructure is properly protected and no one can break in and steal organizational data or user data. I hope that responds to your question. So it this will basically boil down to your own personal interest. What you need to do is have a proper understanding of what each role entails, and then you get to make a much more informed decision. WULV, I'm not sure what your question is. You said, will that be impactful? I would like to get a little more context on that. All right, so if I want to register one of my MSCs, do I have to pay for two persons or one? Yes, Kenneth. Okay, I think Ubong Oluwashun responded. Can I register as a group? If yes, how does that work? Some of my students who would like to be part of the course for their research thesis. All right, so each one of them would have to pay their own respective enrollment fee. Right, so what you can actually do is take advantage of the discounts that is available at the moment. Right, so what you can do is take advantage of the discounts that is available at the moment. So you can just reach out to them while the discount still lasts. They can begin to make payments. So that the price change does not really affect them. I hope that responds to your question. All right, so any other questions, please, you can use the raise hand gesture. All right, you're welcome, Prof. You're welcome, Prof. Any other questions? Any other questions? It's been a wonderful and exciting session. If there are no other questions, I believe we can draw the curtains at this point.